I recorded a video asking if Mattel butchered Thomas and Friends. Everybody gave a pretty resounding answer on that one. But someone in my comment section asked a very interesting question. If another company took over Thomas and Friends, would they have done any better with it? An interesting question, and one that I am going to try and explore. So let's get into it. So I did a little bit of digging into the companies that we're interested in buying the Hit Entertainment catalogue, and I found 4 that I want to discuss. Disney, Tomy, Saban, and Hasbro. Now I'll provide a little bit of background on each company in terms of the franchises that they own, their target audience, any feedback, and then my own thoughts on whether they would have done Thomas and Friends justice. So let's start with a big hitter, Disney. We all know Disney. It's a global brand, has a lot of IPs, including such franchises as the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars, which means that their demographic covers all ages, from babies and toddlers right up to adults. Fan response in terms of the content provided by Disney is polarizing at best. Some people believe, in the case of the MCU, that Disney has done more harm than good, and also with Star Wars, whereas their own in-house brands have also had mixed success, especially in terms of their live-action movie adaptations. My own personal thoughts are that if Disney bought Thomas and Friends and the rest of the Hit Entertainment catalogue, I don't think it would have been a good fit. You look at some of the content that Disney have got in their Disney Junior section, which is where Thomas and Friends would go, it's pretty much the same type of stuff that Mattel have done with Thomas and Friends All Engines Go. The only difference being, I don't think it would be in 2D animation. I think it would be in that CGI style that they do for shows like Spidey and His Friends, for example. So while it is a global brand, and they would probably find a way to make their money back off of Thomas and Friends, I think the franchise as a whole would have never even had the renaissance. It would have went to its All Engines Go incarnation a lot sooner than expected. Now we look at Tomy. In terms of Tomy as a company, it doesn't really own a lot of franchises. But according to the Tomy UK website, its target audience is for parents, infants, and toddlers. In terms of fan response, they have pretty positive feedback in terms of their toy lines, but there's nothing really in terms of content. So my thoughts with Tomy is that it's a bit of an unknown. We had Tomy, Thomas and Friends stuff in the UK in terms of merchandise and toys, and the response overall at the time was very positive. I remember owning a Tomy playset back in the 90s, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think in terms of the toy sales department, I think it would do very well. But in terms of the actual show itself, it's a massive unknown. There isn't a lot of things that can back up whether it would have been a good fit or not. Then we move on to Saban Entertainment. Something I didn't actually know was that Saban was now owned by Disney and ABC. I also didn't know that Saban helped create the X-Men animated series in the 90s, as well as other franchises like Power Rangers, Digimon, and VR Troopers. I remember watching that as a kid. So the target audience was for children, teenagers, and young adults. Didn't really have anything that was babies and toddlers side of it. And fan responses were very positive to the content that they put out, especially X-Men the Animated Series and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series. So my thoughts on Saban owning Thomas and Friends, I think they could have done a good job with it. Probably had that renaissance that we got with Mattel, but with the company going on the slide in the early 2010s, it might have wound up going the same way as All Engines Go, because Disney would have bought it, absorbed it into their IP, and probably had the same outcome as I mentioned in the previous. So I think in terms of Saban, it would be pretty much the same as Mattel. And finally we come to Hasbro. Many of you know that Hasbro owns such franchises as the Transformers and My Little Pony. Once again, the target audience is right across the board, from babies and toddlers right up to adults. In terms of fan responses to the franchises, both Transformers and My Little Pony have had significant highs, and they've also had some lows. But overall, the response has been extremely positive. And I think that Hasbro probably would have done the best job with Thomas and Friends if they acquired it. Looking at their back catalogue, especially with Transformers, I think they would have essentially split the franchise in two. They would have had All Engines Go for babies, toddlers, and maybe kept the Thomas and Friends franchise separate for older children, teenagers, and adults. Hasbro seems to be a bit better at diversifying their revenue streams, so to speak. And in terms of their toy lines, it's a vast improvement compared to what we've got with Mattel. You see the care that they put in particular, the Transformers action figures. And I think, once again, they would have had a Thomas and Friends line that would cater to babies and toddlers, and one that is more centered for the older fans of the franchise, possibly bringing back some semblance of die-cast Airtool toys. So overall, I would say that Hasbro probably had the best chance of giving us a franchise that we would deserve with Thomas and Friends. Now, these are all my own opinions, as you know. Your thoughts will probably be different than mine. That's what the comment section's for. Do you think any of these companies would have done Thomas and Friends justice? Is there another company that you think would have done well with Thomas and Friends that maybe I've missed? Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.